Good evening and welcome to Afkar Taza ThinkFest Conversations. My name is Yaqub Khan Bangesh, and today we are here to discuss a very important topic. We've, of course, titled it as War Drums. Is an India-Pakistan War inevitable? But, of course, this is not just the remit of our conversation today. We'll have a wide-ranging conversation on India and Pakistan relations, a little bit about its past, so that we can better understand its current and then, of course, future trajectory. And we've got an excellent panel with us from Pakistan. We have got Mr. Ejaz Haider, who's a very senior journalist. He has worked in several news medias, both print and electronic, and is Pakistan's foremost security expert. We also have from India, Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan, who has been a former editor of The Hindu, is also the founding editor of The Wire, and has also worked for several other news media. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First thing that I, of course, do want to say to our audience also listening in, that I think people on both sides of the border do condemn every form of terrorism, and especially if when it focuses on killing civilians. No one condones that. No one thinks that's a good idea. Terrorism, Pakistan has been one of the world's, most extreme cases of the on the other side of terrorism, victims of terrorism. So Pakistan knows how bad it is when civilians are attacked. And of course, we condemn any attack on civilians. And I think that much must be clear that, our condolences are with those who have died and are injured. And of course, with the whole Indian nation at this heinous attack. So I think that much is very clear and resonates throughout Pakistan. But with that, let me kind of begin the conversation by asking Siddharth. Pahalgam, of course, is not the first time that an attack has happened in Indian-controlled Jammu and Kashmir. This comes, granted, a few years after the last attack, but it's the first one on tourists. So, is there really anything new about this? Has this changed the dynamics on the ground in any manner?
So I think that the scale of what's happened at Pahalgam is something which kind of has shocked everybody, because following the 26/11 terror attack on Bombay in 2008 November, this is perhaps the first sort of large-scale targeted massacre of civilians in a terrorist strike that we've seen, right? So that's a first in, nearly 17 years that civilians have been targeted in this way at this level, at this volume. I mean, civilians have been killed. There have been incidents even in the valley in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years, even earlier. But I would say if we look at August 2019 as one sort of a marker, because that's when the government of India's policy towards J&K undergoes a shift. And even in the aftermath of August 2019, there have been incidents where civilians have been killed. Workers from other states, a couple of instances of religious minorities, Sikhs and Hindus being killed, but nothing on this scale, right? So I think that this takes us back to kind of an earlier era. I should point out for the benefit of your viewers that this is not the first time that in the valley terrorists have targeted civilians on such a large scale. The Pahalgam region itself was the scene of a terrible terror strike in, I would say, August 1st or 2nd, 2000. In which about 29 or 30 people were killed. And that was part of a whole series of attacks that we suspect were orchestrated by the Lashkar-e-Taiba to undercut a ceasefire that the Hizbul Mujahideen had announced a week earlier. But that was a different era, right? I mean, 2000 now seems like aeons ago. And, I think what's made this attack particularly significant in political terms and also in security terms is that it directly refutes a key claim made by the Modi government, or two key claims made by the Modi government. First, that the revocation of Article 370 and the scrapping of Jammu and Kashmir's special constitutional status in August 2019, marks a turning point, and that peace and normalcy have now been restored, and that the threat of terrorism has receded and has been dealt with firmly. We knew that this wasn't true because there were ongoing incidents, but this is very decisive in terms of refuting this key claim that the Modi government has made. And the second claim, and this I'm saying in reference to the government's assertion that the fingerprints for this attack get traced back to organizations in Pakistan. We were told in the aftermath of the Pulwama attack on Indian security forces and then the Indian airstrike at Balakot, we were told that this kind of retaliatory action and what's called surgical strikes and so on, and we can debate what exactly happened then, how effective were they, what did they really achieve, but the government key claim has been that thanks to the muscular use of security, the armed forces, and this hot pursuit, and Modi's phrase of "Ghar mein ghus ke marenge," this has served as a deterrent, right? So Pahalgam essentially refutes these two key claims, and I think that's what makes it politically so, I would say, consequential for India at this juncture, and for the Modi government and for the BJP in particular. It's pursued a certain approach towards J&K and towards Pakistan, and has said that this approach is vindicated by the end of terror and the fact that groups in Pakistan, even if they're a threat, we know how to neutralize them. And this event has shown that, sorry, your strategy hasn't worked. And that terrorism remains a problem. Various militant and terrorist groups who are in Pakistan continue to believe that they can strike targets in India without any fear of retribution, or so that deterrent factor is not there. And the third set of questions that get opened up, which perhaps goes beyond the scope of this discussion, but we should flag it and maybe come back to it at some future point, which is the political handling of the domestic aspect of J&K, right? So the government of India had assumed, Modi government had assumed that revocation of 370 is also now creating a new paradigm for J&K internally within India. And I think that the Pahalgam incident, the aftermath of the Pahalgam incident, shows the extent to which there is still a massive disconnect between New Delhi, between the Union of India, the government of India, and the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So there is that disconnect, which Mr. Modi's policies have not, helped to bridge in the least. If anything, they would have made things worse. But that, as I said, is a slightly separate topic.
No, I think, thank you for that, Siddharth. And I think it's very important to highlight that domestic side of it too, because one of the main reasons of course, that, within minutes of actually the attack happening, the government and perhaps the media, and we'll come back to the media later on, began blaming Pakistan, because as if Pakistan isn't there, all is well in Jammu and Kashmir, and nothing is wrong, and whatever happened in 2019 has been gobbled up by the local population, and there are no problems. So there is an important domestic element to it. But let me come to Ejaz now. And I should also flag for all our viewers now that they can comment their questions, and towards the end of the program, we will come to their comments and questions also. So they are welcome to put them in the YouTube channel at this moment. Ejaz, let me come to you. Do you really believe there is a resistance? What is this resistance front that had this one tweet, and 3 days later that tweet was deleted? Do you actually believe that any Pakistani-based group is A, strong enough to do that, or B, even did that? Or do you think that this is very much a false flag operation?
Thank you, Yaqub. So, on a lighter note, because the topic is war drums and whether it's going to be a war or not. So let me just say that there's not going to be any war. Two reasons. One is that the Cabinet Committee on Security's in-camera meeting, and then the statement that was put out, which essentially said that the service chiefs had been given carte blanche to figure out how to punish Pakistan. We can go into the technical details of that later in terms of what kind of, or whether, if at all, the Indian military has any military options, and not just military options, but options where the Indian military can control and dominate escalation. We can come to that. The second thing is, and I'm sure Siddharth is enjoying a vacation in the mountains, but I'm sure he's watching what's happening in India. I think it's about 3 hours ago that Mr. Modi has actually launched a surgical strike on the Indian political opposition by announcing the caste census. Now, we know that that is a very controversial issue. The opposition had been basically demanding that there should be one. The BJP and the RSS were against this, but the Union Minister, Ashwin something, I forget his surname, he had a presser, and the media was actually asking him about what happened at the Cabinet Committee on Security's meeting, but he refused to answer that. Instead, he took out a paper from his pocket and he started reading about this whole thing, this announcement of caste census. Essentially, a diversionary tactics of moving the conversation away from this whole India-Pakistan thing to a domestic issue, which is fairly controversial. Now, having said that, and before I get to this issue of false flag operation, I want to talk about this term terrorism. I find this, and this is not about semantics, and this is not an academic issue. Language is important because it creates meaning, especially in the real world, especially where politics and geopolitics is concerned. Well, let me give you an example. After the 7th October attack by Hamas into occupied Palestine, what was the conversation in the Western media? The conversation was that anyone who came, especially from the other side, which is from the Palestinian side or the pro-Palestinian side, the first question would be, do you condemn this attack? Without contextualizing, without realizing that if an attack has happened, and yes, something like that, when it happens, excesses happen. They have happened in wars of independence, and they will happen again unless states and stronger geopolitical actors begin to look at these problems differently from the way they've been looking at it in terms of projection of power. So therefore, this whole idea of whether what happens in occupied Kashmir, or what you referred to in your opening as India-controlled Kashmir.
No, okay.
What happens there, do we need to contextualize it? If the resistance is going to do something, even when there are excesses involved, are we going to, at the minimum, juxtapose that with the state suppression and oppression of the Kashmiris that has been going on for such a long time? And if we are not going to do that, then clearly there is a slant in how we are arguing this. And that is how the Indian state, and barring some exceptions, most Indians argue this point. Let me also say that there are, and this is again with reference to the Middle East, there are at least 2 UNGA resolutions that are on record that accept the fact that people under occupation have the right to resistance, armed resistance, and they also have the right to call upon external actors to actually support. The third point that I want to make is that multiple state actors in the world have actually used non-state actors to further their state interests. The United States has done that very recently in Syria. India did it with reference to Mukti Bani, that we considered as terrorist. India did this with LTTE, and so on and so forth. So therefore, at the minimum, we have to figure out that what we call terrorism. For instance, this particular group of people who targeted the tourists did not consciously kill children and women. So are we going to say that that means that they were 50% terrorists and 50% humanistic? My point being that these categories are politically charged, and we have to be aware of that at the minimum. Secondly, with reference to false flag, I don't know. I have no idea what this resistance front is. I have no idea, and I've been asking people. I've been in this business for a long time. I do have sources to try and figure out what kind of relationship this group has with Lashkar-e-Taiba. I have no information. But as far as I also don't have any information or any corroboration or evidence whether it's a false flag. Having said that, a number of attacks over many, many years, and some of that investigation, for instance, our dear friend Siddharth himself personally as an investigative reporter and editor has done. Chatti Singh Pura, the inquiry committee, in which a former Lieutenant General of the Indian Army, K.S. Gill, was part of that. K.S. Gill is on record as having said that this was done by the Ahwanis at the behest of some elements within the Indian Army. I'm not saying this. He said this. Similarly, Madeleine Albright, in the introduction to Madeleine Albright's book, High and Mighty, President Clinton, who was visiting India at that time, writes that he was not convinced, words to that, I don't have the book in front of me, but basically that this was not done by the people that India alleged had done this. But following this, there was the Pathribal massacre, in which the Indian Army, 7 Rashtriya Rifles, killed 5 people, burnt the bodies, claimed that these were the foreign militants who had actually done Chatti Singh Pura. Interestingly enough, if my memory serves me right, within, I think, this is a separate incident, within 2 or 3 days of this, another such incident happened in Barakpura, this time by the Kashmir police, supposedly in conjunction with the Indian Army, where I think another 3 or 4 people were killed. And once again, the claim was that these foreign militants had done Chatti Singh Pura. 12 years after that, the CBI, the Indian CBI, said to the Indian Supreme Court that these were fake encounters. Davinder Singh, his role in the parliament attack, and so on. I can go on, but I don't want to, hog the time. My point being that and Pulwama, Frontline did an entire issue 1 year after that, raising a number of questions. My point being that none of these questions has been addressed by successive Indian governments to the satisfaction of any objective reader or viewer or someone who wants to know exactly what happened. And Josie Joseph, again an Indian journalist, has written this book, The Silent Coup, in which he has talked about the deep state and how the deep state does all this. So therefore, once again, I have no idea whether it's false flag. All I'm saying is that a number of previous incidents have happened which call for objective inquiries, and therefore one is always left hanging in the air about how something happened, although we know why it happens, in the sense that, yes,
Well,
you
thank
can
you.
induce a group predisposed to doing something like this because there is oppression.
Nee, thank you, Ejaz, for that. And I think your point about contextualization is very important. And I think that is something that I was saying. We need to talk about the history of it. This is not an isolated incident. We are not talking about territory that's internationally recognized also as a part of India. There is a 75-year-old history to it. So you can't kind of like you said in the Israeli-Palestinian issue, you can't just say that this is one isolated incident. It has a whole context to it that one can't forget. But let me just come to Siddharth. I think Ejaz here has given a long list of places where false flags have been identified and where enough questions have been raised to question the credibility of the government's version. Have you seen up till now beyond the fantastic claim that within 15 minutes of the attacks, it said, oh, it's done by Pakistan, and some claims, has any credible or any verifiable information been shared by the Indian government that these attacks had anything to do with anyone in Pakistan?
So I'll answer that, but I need to address some of the issues that Ejaz Sahab raised. I'll start with the question of false flag. I think that, first of all, there is no incident so far. Neither Parliament attack, nor Chitty Singhpura, nor Pulwama, where there is any credible information, allegation, or investigation which is established, anything even remotely suggesting that these were false flag operations. Do we know the full answers to all of these incidents? Who exactly plotted it? What their aims were? No. But if you look at the history of the subcontinent, there are dozens of major crimes committed where the full facts never emerge. And I think it's a huge stretch to simply assert, based on there being unknowables, that this points to a false flag. I think the bar has to be, false flag is such a serious charge that you can't make an allegation of false flag based on the absence of evidence supporting the government's version. If one wants to sustain a charge of false flag, one should provide some evidence, some smoking gun that bears that out. And frankly, we don't have that. Even in the case of Chitty Singhpura, I can think of a perfectly rational narrative. I mean, and the Ejaz is right. I did cover not the Chatti Singhpura killings themselves, but the aftermath, which is Patribal. Brakpura, incidentally, things are slightly different than what you narrated, Ejaz. Essentially, after the army and police claimed to have killed 5 terrorists at Patribal, local people correlated that 5 of their guys had gone missing. And a suspicion arose that the 5 people killed were actually these 5 villagers. And so you had for 6 or 7 weeks, a protest mounted by these locals demanding that the bodies be exhumed. Correct. And at Brakpura, one of these protests, the CRPF opened fire and killed, I think, not 3, but I think 9 or 10 people. And there was a separate commission, the Justice Pandian Commission, which laid the blame solely at CRPF's door. The bodies were then exhumed. And of course, they were proved civilians. And as you say, the CBI later essentially indicted the army for having murdered these guys. And, so there's two constructions one can put to it. General Gill, incidentally, that you mentioned, was not part of any official. He's a retired officer who gave an interview in Canada where he made this statement. Frankly, we looked at it seriously as reporters. That is there some meat to go on to corroborate this? There's nothing. Barry Bierak of New York Times, spent long time in Chhattisgarh speaking to villagers. He even interviewed 2 guys who were accused of the crime, who eventually, after many years, were finally acquitted for lack of evidence. Yeah, but that's also not surprising.
I think that is also something that you covered, because
no, absolutely, 100%.
Because Bierak interviewed this guy.
Yes, exactly.
Hafiz Saeed's nephew.
That's right.
Who was later, acquitted. And Barrett's findings were that he wasn't convinced that his so-called confession was credible.
Yeah. You see, it doesn't surprise me because, I mean, and if you ask me, like my response to the charge of false flag in Siddharth and can I come up with a narrative that explains Patribal and all of these things? Yeah, I can. Which is that you have an incident that happens, and this happens when Clinton is visiting. The whole system goes into a terrible panic. Orders are issued from the top. कि 24-48 घंटे में मुझे वो बंदे चाहिए मुर्दा या जिंदा, right? And you basically incentivize the armed forces to go out there and just catch anybody. Correct. So this round up the usual suspects, to use the phrase of the Casablanca police chief, from the film. So the cops just rounded up random guys and essentially then pinned, and they thought that this was going to close the chapter. And that this will put a lid to this, extremely embarrassing international story. And then, of course, they catch a guy, the guy confesses, but there is no evidence. And, and my problem with as an analyst, and I mentioned this in my piece, because this is not just a moral point कि आपने गलत बंदों को मार दिया या आपने innocent लोगों को मार दिया. Correct. One of the consequences of actually this kind of approach to counterterrorism, where you just catch anybody and kill anybody and claim that the problem is solved, is that you don't then have open, active investigations. So Chhattisgarh Singhpura, in my book, remains an unsolved crime. And the perpetrators were never identified, investigated, punished, brought to justice. And I ended my piece on Pahalgam saying that for all we know, some of the buggers who opened fire on the innocent civilians in Pahalgam were actually the ones involved in Chhattisgarh Singhpura. We don't know. Now, the question of, I don't think we need to get caught in semantics here too much, because the targeting of civilians, it doesn't matter if women and children are spared. The BLA spared women and children on the Jafar Express, and I suspect that
no,
it doesn't matter. I'm saying that
it matters.
No. I'm saying that the ethnic. All I'm saying is that the sparing of women and children doesn't mean that an act of killing civilians is not terrorist. I think that the message that was sent, I think there was an attempt to establish an equivalence here. And a couple of intelligence officers who I respect on the Indian side have written this actually, that given the MO of what happened on the train, that women and children were let off and not killed by these guys, something similar was done here because the Pakistani state believes India was responsible for the train hijacking. I don't know. I mean, this is speculation by intel guys. Yeah,
they were spared because they belong to the ethnic group of the attackers. That's a very important point.
No, but they know. No, but I'm saying women and maybe they will know. Anyway, the point is that this is not. I'm saying I can think of hundreds of instances where women and children are spared. For example, throughout the Khalistani terrorist campaign, for example, they would stop buses in Punjab, take out Hindu males, shoot them. Hindu women were not touched, right? But that doesn't mean that this is not a terror attack, right? So I don't think that we need to get into this. And frankly,
with respect,
sure,
because I think I need to clarify this. My point was that, for instance, right now you have yourself talked about how the state and state's operatives and functionaries have, on a number of occasions, killed civilians in cold blood. See, but because we have gotten used to using the state as the unit of analysis, as an entity that is de jure and de facto legitimate, therefore, we do not use.
No, it's not. In my view, it's called that state terrorism. Like if the state uses violence against civilians, that's state terrorism.
Then we are on the same page.
Yeah. But I'm saying that
one other point with respect, because before we move forward, I did not say that this is a false flag operation. I simply narrated incidents where there is enough evidence. It doesn't prove that it was a false flag. There's enough evidence to suggest that something was amiss.
Let's get Siddharth to get on this about evidence issue.
There is zero evidence there is zero, and I'm saying this with full sense of responsibility. There is zero evidence that Chiti Singh Pura is false flag. Zero. There is zero evidence that the attack on Parliament was false flag. And frankly, I know many people have tried to analyze and question, the Pulwama attack on CRPF Jawans, the massive intelligence failure. But that's the way these systems. These are we're dealing with highly inefficient states in both India and Pakistan. And with security forces that are overstretched. Anyway, the point is that there is no evidence of false flag, and I would like to see some. I'm happy to debate it if evidence were to come. I have a completely open mind. False flag operations have happened around the world, and there's no reason why they can't happen in our part of the world, but there has to be evidence to sustain that. And just one last point before we move on to the wider question of what happens next. And I also want to answer Yaqub's point about what evidence the government of India may be operating on. That, again, semantics, I don't accept. See, I don't think the situation in Jammu Kashmir in international law can be compared to that of the occupied Palestinian territories. Now, Pakistanis may call Kashmir occupied, but in the eyes of it, in international law, the only major occupied territory are the occupied Palestinian territories, where you have a very all of your UNGA resolutions and everything that you refer to speak about occupied territories in international law. J&K is not that. J&K, and we can have an entirely different discussion on this, but the point is it's not that. So if there is no dispute that for purposes of clarity, I would say that if there is an armed group that is fighting to change the status quo and they target security forces only, I would say that that is something different from groups that target civilians. And this is a very clear targeting of civilians. And it's not the first time it's happened. It's happened before. And the government of India suspects that the same, and now I'm coming to the question of evidence. The short answer is that there is nothing in the public domain. So the government of India is operating, I think, on the basis of reasonable suspicion. And essentially, given the TRF's links in as far as, and this is not a new body. They've been making claims for attacks on the security forces as well as civilians for the last 5 or 6 years. And I presume they have evidence, comms, etc., that links this back to LET, I don't know. But in the eyes of the state, the resistance front, and they've identified some of the individuals who are part of this, and based on conversing with local reporters, some of the names and photos that they put out don't seem to be far-fetched. People do say that it's quite likely that those guys were involved. Their connections to their tanzeems are known to the agencies, and I presume that that's what the government is talking about. I don't think you will find that there is evidence of the sort, where you're going to find GHQ issuing an order saying ki Baisaran Maidan mein ye karna hai. That's not at all the kind of evidence the government of India is ever going to have. I doubt that kind of evidence even exists. But essentially, the government of India is making a reasonable supposition that the LET is involved. LET is a recidivist as far as terror strikes in India are concerned. The whole world and Pakistan also knows the evidence that was gathered after the 26/11 Bombay attack. And I think that the mistake the Modi government is making this time compared to the way Manmohan Singh handled it back then was that you had a heinous attack on Bombay, the financial capital of India, 200 plus civilians killed. The government of India then also was under enormous pressure to respond in a kind of knee-jerk fashion. What they did, however, was to painstakingly gather evidence and collate evidence in a form that could be presented to world capitals and to Pakistan, so that you force Pakistan's hand and you get Pakistan to accept responsibility for the fact that organizations based on its territory have been engaging in terrorism. And Pakistan went a long way in accepting that. It was very half-hearted. At the end of the day, the process kind of petered out. The kind of prosecution that should have happened never happened. So these terrorist masterminds essentially continue to operate. And so 26/11 remains like an open wound. And so you have, a whole dossier of evidence of complicity of Pakistan-based organizations. So it's not too much of a stretch if the government of
But
India
it's
were
still
to
an
say that.
intelligent guess.
No, it is. Yeah, I mean, I would say because I'm not privy to any information, and frankly, as you say, the speed with which this was asserted suggests that they were making a very prompt, intelligent guess, and I think a guess also made with one, as I said, what I mentioned, the political factors at the start, right? That Modi is now is under enormous pressure now to respond to this challenge. And so he's, given the kind of stand he's taken in the past, given the kind of method he has pursued of kinetic way of dealing with this kind of a threat, it's inevitable that, there will be some kind of a military targeting. What exactly it will be, what the consequences will be, I think we should debate and discuss now. But I think that, we are in a situation where, I don't hear from global capitals right now. Maybe this is also part of the Modi government is aware that the world situation being what it is, right? Given where the US stands, given other kinds of international crises, I don't see too much in my interaction with Western diplomats, for example, in Delhi. Too much concern about the fact that there is not this easily digestible evidence that India presented back in 2008. There is a desire for restraint. There is a desire that India not do something which escalates. But I think nobody is seriously contesting India's claim that the footprints of this kind of an attack go back to individuals and groups in Pakistan. No one is saying Pakistani state. I mean, the government of India obviously means complicity of the Pakistani state. To my mind, I would say that's an open question. As an analyst, I can see Pakistan-based organizations like Lashkar doing this. To what extent would this have been sanctioned by agencies to whom they have dealings? I don't know. And I can think of good arguments why this would hurt those agencies and hurt Pakistan. I can think of arguments why some hothead may think it may help them. But that's all in the realm of speculation.
Very, very, very important points. And I think the major distinction is that I think the way the Bombay attacks were dealt with and now I think fast it's becoming clear that that's a major distinction. But let me come to you, Ejaz, now. Because
just one thing, the Mumbai investigations were done by the FIA here. And the FIA Director General at that time,
Tariq Khosa.
Tariq Khosa, he's actually written about this. But because there is no mutual legal assistance framework between India and Pakistan, so things got stuck at some point. The thing is that if we're talking about international law, the Palestinian occupied territories are called that because Israel actually captured those territories and occupied them. But the idea, and that is what is part of the UN resolutions and multiple resolutions of the UN CIP, the right to self-determination, if it is denied, that is also occupation. So if we are talking about international law.
No, but it applies no more to Kashmir or Punjab than it does to Balochistan, yeah?
I think we might get stuck in this. I think Ejaz, you made the point. And I think
we are not talking about Goa. We are not talking about Hyderabad, Deccan. We are not talking about how the Indian army went into various states and actually captured them.
No, I'm talking about Balochistan, where Balochis say they want the right to self-determination.
We are talking about a dispute which is live on the UNSC agenda. Second point, even if, since we're talking about law, even if the nationals of a particular state are found to have been involved in a terror attack on foreign soil, the state in and of itself cannot be blamed until it can be established that the state was complicit and actually sponsored that act. So that is right.
But I think that brings it to my question. That brings my question to you, Ejaz, is that and here, because of course we don't know the great details about this, but as an analyst, Do you think there are such organizations? Because, of course, Pakistan has clamped down on even organizations working in Kashmir. That has been happening for quite a while. And, of course, Pakistan has its own problems to deal with. Do you actually think that there are organizations active in Pakistan that are capable of sponsoring such an attack? And B, that anyone in the Pakistan state would actually think there's any benefit to be gleaned from it? Because one of the things here I might point out is that, everyone in India is making a huge sort of hue and cry over General Asim Munir's speech to overseas Pakistanis, where he spoke about the two-nation theory and about Kashmir being the jugular vein. For Pakistanis, that's nothing new. That's what we've been saying for 75 years. But for Indians, it's like...
Actually, no. Yaqub, you are an historian, so obviously that's your expertise. But that's not what history tells us. If it was about Hindu and Muslim thing, then Mr. Jinnah would not have wanted to have undivided Punjab and undivided Bengal.
That's true. I'm just talking about after the creation of Pakistan. It's nothing new to say that.
This whole
it's
thing
nothing new.
Is like, completely, it's a travesty, and, you just upend history and the rest of it. And of course, what the army chief said is not something that, I will hold myself responsible for or the rest of the nation responsible for. But it is, again, a major stretch from that speech to saying that because he said that and therefore this happened, So there are a number of stretches here, leaps of imagination. But the essential point to note is that on the basis of, and the New York Times has reported that after the diplomats were briefed, they were not convinced by the evidence, whatever evidence had been presented to them. They were not convinced by that evidence that it pointed to Pakistan.
No, there was actually no evidence presented in that meeting, huh?
But because the rhetoric goes to fever pitch, India's responses have become infuriatingly formulaic, in the sense that it's almost like a typecast character. An attack will happen, India will blame Pakistan, the studio core of the BJP will, suddenly come live, they will wage a war, declare war, wage it, win it, get all these former diplomats and military officers who will come and froth at the mouth, talk about how to dismantle. I mean, someone as sensible as what's the name of our friend who's the Congress spokesperson, Manish Tiwari. Manish Tiwari has written something asking for Pakistan dismemberment. I mean, for Darwin's sake, I mean, you are such a highly intelligent person, and you just give in to these base emotions and talking about something which you just simply cannot do. But my point being that such is the nature of this rhetoric that Modi government entraps itself into this commitment. And then people want the government to match the rhetoric with some action on the ground. And when it comes to action on the ground, frankly, the Indians do not have any viable military options. I wrote on day one, I tweeted, and I also asked, as a matter of fact, I had this discussion with SV also bilaterally, and a few other Indian friends. I have been, 30 साल से मैं भी छक मार रहा हूँ nuclear strategy और इसके अंदर. And I wanted to find out, how do you suppose, given your current level of capabilities, that you can not just control escalation, but also dominate it? And I can tell you, I mean, this is not new. So just bear with me. So assumptions kya hai? The assumption is there is a band in which India can use and exploit a limited conventional military option. And this is because it has conventional superiority. And if it does so in response to an attack, it can pin on Pakistan, which is what we see constantly. It has enough diplomatic weight to have the world opinion on its side for such a strike. And Pakistan, having suffered a setback, this inheres in this assumption, and quite arbitrarily will be hard pressed to retaliate because it'll have to climb up the escalation ladder, which is obviously going to be a costly proposition for reasons of the earlier military setback, as well as international diplomatic pressure. And because India will have an upper hand, both militarily and diplomatically, Pakistan will choose not to escalate. This is the whole idea of planned escalation. Now, if Pakistan does choose to escalate, India will still enjoy escalation dominance because of its superior capabilities and international diplomatic support. Now, the basic premise in all this cannot be missed. And what is that premise? The first round result. Every subsequent assumption flows from what India would or could achieve militarily in the opening hand. But if the presumably weaker side, which is us, denies India, which is the stronger side, success in the opening round, draw its own blood successfully while showing restraint, and I'm actually referring to 2019, it can raise the cost for the stronger actor. And it ends up upending the latter's assumptions based on the success of the opening round. And that is essentially the crux of this entire thing.
So,
and
Siddharth, how do you see?
Just one point, just quickly, and all of this is unfolding under the nuclear overhang.
No, true. But let me come to Siddharth now. Since Ejaz has begun a discussion about military options, as an analyst, what do you think are the reasonable military options India has? Because of course, as Ejaz said, that and also as you also said, this is a domestic issue, this is an international issue, and has created the government itself perhaps has manufactured to a certain extent that kind of a pressure that it has to do something. What do you think are the has to do? What can it reasonably do? So that the end result that Ejaz is saying, that if the weaker power, so to speak, Pakistan, can actually thwart an attack, then it'll be even worse for India. So what do you think reasonably can be done? And if you were there, let's say, because of course we are not privy, neither of us are privy to the real discussions. But if you had to make some decisions here, what would you have been doing?
See, the thing is that honestly, there's no way I can answer that because I don't even have Ejaz Haider's background in the military before becoming a journalist. So that's one advantage he has over me. But frankly, see, these are decisions which professionals have to assess and take, which is why even the Government of India statement after the Prime Minister met with the service chiefs and so on was that the military has been told to make its assessment and go ahead, and the political leadership will back them with what choices they make. So, and I would imagine that professional men and women who serve in these, who are in these services and who are part of making this kind of assessment will have a set of contingencies. Nothing that Ejaz has said is unusual or perturbing or shocking. I mean, this is a fact of life. I would say, in fact, that it's a misnomer to think that Pakistan is conventionally inferior. I would say that, in fact, you're looking at two militaries that are quite evenly matched in the conventional sense, at the conventional level. So, whatever advantages India has over Pakistan or vice versa, maybe at the tactical level in certain areas along the LC, certain areas along the international border, I don't know. But in terms of military to military over a limited time horizon, that any skirmish or conflict would last, the two militaries are pretty evenly matched. So frankly, the professionals on the Indian side will make this assessment, will come up with the list of plausible targets that they could do something about, and hope that all goes well. But frankly, I don't know. I mean, if you look at Balakot, there is a whole debate still going on internationally, and to some extent even within India, about what exactly was accomplished at Balakot. I would say that the government has not provided information and evidence to back up its claim that the strike was riggingly successful. And they say, well, it's not our job to provide that evidence. Maybe, fair enough. But in the eyes of the public, it's not clear what was accomplished there. And then you had a dogfight in which an Indian plane was shot down, Indian pilot was captured. The Indian side claims that an F-16 was down, but there's no objective evidence of that. And then Pakistan did a kind of some Noora Kushti airstrike at a certain location on on the Indian side where some barracks were hit. So frankly, we don't know. But that's an example, I suppose. Having factored in everything Ejaz has said, I would offer Balakot and its aftermath as an example of kinetic action that happens within a very definite band, and which allows the political side on both sides, political leadership on both sides, to walk away without feeling under pressure that they need to escalate. So, in a funny sort of way, if Balakot was a dud militarily, we know that it was a dud because it didn't deter, right? Pahalgam is proof that Balakot did not deter, regardless of what you hit. Even if the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh is right that 350 mobile phones went silent after our missiles hit, and that means we killed 350 bad guys. Even if we accept that, Pahalgam shows it wasn't a deterrent, right? But Balakot maybe is an example that here you have, political leadership ordering a military strike. That happens. You have a counterattack. You have a dogfight, and then both sides walk away with the narrative that, frankly, they managed to convince their publics about. Nobody in India seriously disputes what the government says about Balakot, and nobody in Pakistan probably disputes what the Pakistani military says about Balakot being a failure. So, frankly, if it worked once before, maybe it'll work again. I don't know. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but it's very clear that the Modi government is in a situation where it is inevitably going to look for some kind of a military, retaliation here, right? And just as soon as day follows night or night follows day, the Pakistani side is going to feel bound to retaliate in some way. And the world today is very different from the world it was in 2019. We don't know the full extent to which the Imran Khan government listened to what the Americans were saying, or whether Modi listened to what the Americans were saying. But you had a kind of de-escalation. Captain Abhinandan was released pretty quickly, and the matter was allowed to kind of go away. Will that happen again? Will we have a neat de-escalation? I share what Ejaz began this program with, that there's no war, there's no likelihood of war, because the two sides are evenly matched, and when two evenly matched adversaries fight and they both have nuclear weapons, you're in a very dangerous territory, and neither side is irresponsible enough to go down that path. Hence, I think whatever happens is going to be limited. And I can say off the top of my head that I doubt very much that it will produce the kind of closure that the Modi government is promising the people of India, because the threat of violence emanating from Pakistan requires handling of a different kind. And I don't think looking purely at kinetic options or looking at this, how much lower can you push bilateral India-Pak relations? I mean, there was no. I've crossed, in the last 1 year, I crossed Wagah 3 times maybe, and there was hardly any traffic anyway. So what does it mean to say that we're shutting down Wagah? So 5 people who crossed every day or 10 people who crossed every day can't cross anymore, and there was no trade worth its name anyway. So all of these things, the relationship is anyway so bad. We need to look at a different way of solving this problem.
True that. Yeah. Ejaz, Siddharth has just said that Balakot type operation might be an option. And of course, I should add, we are still very unhappy about all the trees we actually lost in that operation, in the Indian operation. Do you think, Ejaz, that is a viable option that the Indians can actually use? And do you think, is this something that Pakistan will also respond to an extent as it responded at the Balakot incident? Do you think that could be a viable framework to limit this?
Before I come to that, somewhat circuitously, I think Siddharth has raised a the central point here. And that central point is about deterrent. Now, let me put it like this. So everyone knows about Clausewitz. So Clausewitz's triple nature of war, you've got the passion of the people, and then you've got the management of violence, and then you have to wed that to the political objective. So that's the grammar of war. And he talked about it in terms of what he said, sweat on zeal. So sweat, which is the purpose, that's the broader purpose for which you go to war. And zeal is the aim which you can achieve through a battle or multiple battles. So therefore, the zeal, the battle or battles that you have to fight have to be subordinate to the purpose, the political objective for which you are fighting this. Because this is not school brawls. It's not, you're not getting into fighting just for the heck of it. You got to get something out of it. So what is the political objective? The political objective is, from India's perspective, to deter Pakistan from doing anything in the future which India considers to be inimical to India's interests. In this particular case, from India's perspective, that no, Pakistan ensures that nothing happens in Jammu and Kashmir. Right? Now, in the event that at a tactical level, hypothetically speaking, even if India were to have a tactical victory, but is incapable of changing Pakistan's behavior or deterring it, it hasn't won. You see, that is the nature of war. Now, coming to your point with reference, see, Balakot, we, both sides, got off easily, mercifully, because when we sent our strike package, that strike package completely dominated the electromagnetic spectrum. The Indian Combat Air Patrol, of which Abhinandan was a part, they did not even know, they were blind. They did not even know what they were getting into. Okay? And this was one thing. The second thing was that we had decided that we lock in the targets, but not actually engage them. So you show resolve, but you also give an off-ramp to the other side. Now, the Indian Air Force, it's a professional Air Force, highly qualified planners, fighters, the rest of them, they knew exactly what had happened. And which is why when Ajit Doval called up the DGI, who's the current army chief of Pakistan, and threatened missile strikes, it was a simple acknowledgement that the Indian Air Force had realized that if they were to take on the Pakistan Air Force, they will lose more face. And therefore, missile strikes were. To which our response was that there's going to be quid pro quo plus. And then, of course, there was also the decision to return Abhinandan. There were also international brokering. And so multiple factors combined to bring the temperatures down. However, the reason I would not, advise India and Pakistan to get into this kind of thing is, for instance, if the Indian strikes in Balakot had actually killed 200 or 300 people on Pakistani soil, Pakistani response would not have been simply to lock the targets and shoot the missiles to one side. They would have actually destroyed those targets. The destruction of those targets would have been a notch higher. Then India would have been under pressure to respond. And so we would have gotten into this escalation cycle, which is why I have constantly said, since this began, asking people, especially people with fancy degrees, please tell me how you can have planned escalation. There is no such thing as planned escalation, and forget about higher strategy. Just go back to what Mike Tyson said. Everyone has a plan until he gets punched in the face. Once you get punched in the face, everything is defenestrated.
Everything is off. Yeah. True that. Let me just actually bring in some of the questions that we've been receiving. One thing is about the media, but let me kind of frame that in a larger question about the public, because I think in this scenario, it's been very interesting that on the one side, where at least the media is portraying in India that the whole country wants Pakistan eliminated off the face of the earth, and everyone's united in it. On the Pakistan side, we are just making memes out of them. It's very interesting. There are no protests here saying, we'll screw India and that. We're just making memes, which is infuriating Indian right-wing people even more. One of the memes which I really, really love is that someone from India wrote and said, time to erase Pakistan off the map. And this guy just wrote with a pencil on top and said, "Main phir draw kar lunga." So all these kinds of like funny things. And is that real? So on the Pakistani side, of course, there is no media hysteria that let's kill Indians. And mind you, this is on the heels of the Jafar Express attack. We could have done the exact same thing and saying, let's go and kill all those terrorists in India. We know actually that a lot of BLA people do visit India, are in India. So it's not as if that we don't know that. But there was no hysteria of that sort. And now, even when there is so much on the Indian side, the Pakistanis are just making memes, and they've made hundreds and thousands of memes in the last couple of days. But on the Indian side, we see this mass kind of let's screw Pakistan, let's dismember it and all that. Siddharth, is that real? Or is that a media manufactured thing? Or is the person on the ground really that sort of, blindly now anti-Pakistani? And let me add this news item to it, that just the other day I was reading NDTV where it was talking about that, this poor guy in Karnataka was lynched by just saying Pakistan Zindabad, which is just shocking, to put it mildly. What's the real ground reality there, and what has really changed there?
And the irony is, you probably didn't even say that, because
No,
the details, the facts are all very vague. Look, there is a lot of anger, and I would say there's a lot of righteous anger, because what happened in Pahalgam is unforgivable, and clearly the way in which the terrorists consciously targeted Hindus, the idea was to play on the fear and insecurity of ordinary people, and essentially heighten or sharpen pre-existing divisions or polarizations, which the terrorists knew are a part of Indian social fabric. So they've tapped into that and quite successfully. And then you've had rabble rousers from the BJP who are further exacerbating that. But there is palpable anger, and this anger is actually, the BJP and some hotheads are trying to turn it into anger against Kashmiris, Kashmiri students, or Indian Muslims in general. The broad anger is against Pakistan. And, Manish Tiwari that you mentioned, he's a rational guy, and he writes this op-ed. And I think he's reflecting that kind of that anger. I'm sure a year or two from now he'll be quite embarrassed about this piece. So there is that anger, and this anger, and the reason it's not comparable to what is there in Pakistan or after the Jafar Express is because I think deep down, people of Pakistan also know that what is happening in Balochistan is something which the Pakistani establishment has created. They have messed things up. They're messing it up on a daily basis. They've created broad alienation. You had problem of disappeared people. I've been following the agitation of the Maharana Baloch and others for some time. And so there is a very definite issue there. And people of Pakistan know that the Balochis are being treated unjustly. And what has happened on the train, even if the Pakistani government tries to say that this is entirely done by India, people don't necessarily buy into that at the same level to which people in India are prepared to accept that Pakistan is doing all of these things, because you have 2611, you have lots of examples, right? So So there is, I mean, I can't deny the fact that there is public anger. However, the public view is operating at different levels. So there are a lot of people who are also asking questions about how did the government allow an incident of this kind to happen? Why were they caught sleeping at the wheel? Why did Mr. Modi, who claims to have put an end to terrorism, why did he fail to stop this? And even simple questions people are asking, that you came all the way back from Saudi Arabia, where you were on a bilateral visit. You were caught, obviously, by surprise by this attack. You come back. You haven't visited Pahalgam. You haven't visited any of the victims of this attack. You didn't take part in the all-party meeting that was called to discuss this. You instead go to Bihar as part of an election rally, right? So there's a lot of public anger, cynicism about what Modi is doing, which Modi hopes to paper over by, once some kind of a military response is worked out, right? So the public is operating at different levels, and just like you have Godi media or Gid media, which is trying to feast on this problem for their own TRP ratings and to suck up to the government. You have lots of independent commentators, social media influencers who are asking these difficult questions. And it hurts me to say to point out that the police has become so thin-skinned in some of the BJP-ruled states that they've actually filed sedition charges against a couple of influencers on YouTube for poking fun at Modi or questioning Modi's competence or questioning the Modi Shah, Amit Shah approach to Kashmir and so on and so forth. So the fact is that Indian public, I don't think you can say is operating on that there's a single vector of thought. There is anger against Pakistan. There's also a questioning and anger towards the government. Maybe not to the same extent, but it is significant. And so I would say the public as a whole is reacting the way that you would expect public to react. But I think the way the big media is reacting is highly irresponsible. And I think clearly the way that key elements of the ruling party, we've seen, like there was this one guy, a minister in the BJP-led government in Maharashtra, who tried to riff on the fact that the Pahalgam terrorists were, asked people to recite the kalma and then kill those who couldn't recite it. And so this guy, who's a minister, who's taken an oath on the Constitution of India, says that Hindus should ask shopkeepers to recite a Hindu prayer before they buy anything from their shops. Right? So it's a highly irresponsible, inflammatory statement. And frankly, in my eyes, these guys, these ministers, they may cloak themselves in the colors of nationalism, but they're actually operating as force multipliers of the terrorists. Because you're dividing Indians, polarizing Indians on the basis of religion, which is precisely what those gunmen at the Baisaran meadow in Pahalgam were attempting to do.
So that's a very, very important point. And I think your comments about the media and how that's creating this frenzy and this whole question that even if India gets away with doing whatever it wants to Pakistan, this is actually increasing more divisions within India. And I hope that the policymakers and the analysts there are more and more aware of it. That if these fissures continue throughout India, then you'll have a lot of Indian problems rather than just blaming it on Pakistan. But let me give Ejaz a chance to respond to the people thing, because I think it's very important to go beyond that, beyond just the governments and the army and everything, to also speak about the people.
Yeah, thanks, Yaqub. I will also, need to leave after this because I have another recording. Very quickly, there's this ability we have developed in Pakistan to laugh at ourselves. We don't take ourselves very seriously. For instance, one particular meme was that this is a government announcement. Hukumti Alamiya. भारत पाकिस्तान पर हमला करने की जुर्रत ना करे, वरना हम भारत का वही असर करेंगे जो हमने पाकिस्तान का किया है. So we have this ability to laugh at ourselves. Indians unfortunately take themselves very seriously. I'm very happy, by the way, what Siddharth said about how we criticize our state for its various misdoings in Balochistan. Even though Balochistan is part of Pakistan, it's not disputed territory. But we have always we've always been suspect of the state. We suspect the state, and therefore we try to hold its feet to fire. I really only wish that more and more Indians would actually begin to hold their state's feet to fire when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. I only wish that they were to start looking at what the Indian state does to the Kashmiris and how it suppresses and oppresses them, the way we hold our state's feet to fire when it comes to misdoings in our federating units. And but as I said, I need to go, and once again,
I need to.
Once again,
we are out of time in any case.
So
but
everyone should relax. By the way, Siddharth already is vacationing in the hills, so
yeah.
thank
you.
It's not going to be shooting.
Well, thank you both, Ejaz and Siddharth, for this. I should say that by the end of it, one thing that I did want to discuss, and sadly we didn't have time for it, is the question of people. Because by the end of it, if there is a skirmish, if there is war, or if there's anything, it's the common man that will suffer on both sides. And that's the common man. If it's across the international border, it'll be a Punjabi on both sides. If it's on the LOC, it'll be a Kashmiri on both sides. So I think one needs to take that into consideration, and I hope that the governments will kind of think about this. And also, again, as Ejaz said, putting your own house in order is kind of priority number one, rather than creating other diversions for it. But I should say there have been lots of comments and lots of questions. But one comment which I really love was perhaps, I think, the second or the third comment saying this channel should also be banned in India. So I think we have done our bit. And one other, actually, I really do want to answer that this one person said, so why does this channel always invite lefties and Congress type walas?
By the way, that reminds me quickly, and then we have to go.
Yeah.
I had SV on one of my programs, the one that I do for our think tank, and it was amazing. They said, why, basically targeting me, why could he not get an Indian? Why did he have to get this person?
Well, I should answer that question by saying that if you mean a Congress type person, if you mean that the party that created India, that actually gave it the father of the nation was a part of that party, the first prime minister was, and a lot of what India is today is because of that political party, then yes, I would rather have that political party represented rather than people who want to scream and burn people who have actually done that. So I did want to answer that question. But again, thank you so much, and I hope that of your predictions that there will be no war, I hope and pray that becomes the case. And I hope that the next time we have this kind of a conversation, this very unfortunate incident would have been behind us, and we would talk about how some confidence building measures can actually take place between India and Pakistan to ultimately, and I said I'll come back to history, and I just want to end on history. Kashmir needs a solution. The whole point of this is that if you keep the Kashmir thing disputed, things like this will always happen, even if there is no Pakistan in the world. So thinking that one day if Pakistan vanishes, this whole thing will end, it won't. So I think the real core things really eventually need to be discussed and resolved in an amicable manner. So thank you both again, and thank you all for watching us.